My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 34 years old, and I can still feel the cold dread that washed over me, the way the air thinned in that sterile conference room. It was supposed to be my moment, the culmination of months, no, years, of silent, thankless work. Instead, I stood there, watching Mark Jenkins, our department's golden boy, and my manager, Mr. Harrison, present my meticulously crafted Phoenix Initiative as their own brilliant brainchild. The same project they'd laughed off when I'd tentatively suggested its core concepts months earlier. The same project I was, unbeknownst to them, already leading with a skeleton crew in the shadows. "Eleanor, you're a good worker bee," Mr. Harrison had said to me just the week before, his voice dripping with condescension during my performance review, a review where I'd hoped to finally discuss a team lead role. But management? That requires a certain presence, a command. "You're just not built for that, dear." Mark had smirked from the adjacent desk, adding, "Yeah, Ellie, some people are meant to follow, not lead. Don't take it personally." The memory burned, a fresh wound on top of so many others. And now, here they were, basking in the anticipated glory of my labor, my vision. Mark was pointing at slides, my slides, with minor cosmetic changes, his voice booming with false confidence, while Mr. Harrison nodded sagely, occasionally interjecting with some platitude about our team's innovative spirit. The executives were nodding, impressed. I felt invisible, a ghost in my own success story, a success they were actively stealing. My blood boiled, but my face remained a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. They thought I was just some quiet, unassuming data analyst they could trample over. They thought I'd just accept it, like all the other times they'd taken credit for my ideas or dismissed my contributions. They had no idea that this time their arrogance had pushed me too far. They had no idea about the ace I had up my sleeve, the one I'd been carefully cultivating while they were busy underestimating me. The sheer audacity of it, to not only belittle my capabilities, but then to try and hijack the very thing that would prove them wrong. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to have someone else try to snatch the credit, or worse, tell you that you weren't even capable of achieving it in the first place? Share your story in the comments below. It's a gut-wrenching feeling, and I want to show everyone that we're not alone in these battles. And please, don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how this all played out. Because what they didn't know was that this presentation, this grand theft of intellectual property, was about to become the stage for their most public, most humiliating downfall. And I, Eleanor Vance, the worker bee who would supposedly never manage a team, was about to show them exactly what command looked like. They thought they were at the finish line, but they were actually standing at the edge of a cliff I had expertly led them to. The silence in that room, before the storm I was about to unleash, was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. They were so confident, so smug, completely oblivious that their world was about to be turned upside down. And the best part? I was going to enjoy every second of it. It wasn't always this blatant, this theatrical. The stealing, the dismissal, it used to be more insidious, a slow erosion of my worth that I almost didn't notice until I was neck-deep in their casual contempt. For 5 years at Innovate Solutions, I'd been the reliable one, the one who stayed late, the one who caught the errors others missed, the one who actually understood the complex data streams that formed the backbone of our financial forecasting. Mr. Harrison, my department head, a man whose tailored suits always seemed a size too smug, initially praised my diligence. "Good work, Eleanor," he'd say, a cursory nod before moving on to listen to Mark Jenkins hold court about his weekend golf game. Mark. He'd joined the company 2 years after me, fresh out of an MBA program, armed with a dazzling smile, a firm handshake, and an uncanny ability to rephrase my carefully researched insights as his own spontaneous brilliance during meetings. The first time it happened, it was a minor suggestion for streamlining our quarterly reporting process. I'd mentioned it to Mark in passing, thinking we could collaborate. A week later, he presented it in the team meeting, not as our idea, or even Eleanor's idea I'm building on, but as something I was thinking about. Mr. Harrison lauded his initiative. I remember feeling a small, confused sting. I told myself, It was a misunderstanding. But the misunderstandings kept happening. There was the time I developed a new algorithm to predict market volatility with 15% greater accuracy than our old system. I'd spent 3 months on it, nights and weekends, fueled by coffee and a genuine passion for the challenge. I presented my findings to Mr. Harrison in a one-on-one, complete with a detailed report. He'd seemed vaguely impressed, said he'd take it under advisement. 2 weeks later, at the Regional Managers Conference, Mark was on stage, presenting his new predictive model, my algorithm, barely tweaked, with a flashier PowerPoint template. He got a bonus for that. I got a pat on the back from Mr. Harrison for supporting Mark so well in his endeavors. The injustice of it was a bitter pill I choked down, telling myself to work harder, to be more assertive, to make my contributions undeniable. But how do you assert yourself when your voice is systemically muted? Every time I tried to speak up in larger meetings, Mr. Harrison would either talk over me or worse, listen with a patient, patronizing smile before turning to Mark and asking, "And what's your take on this, Jenkins? Give us the strategic overview." Mark would then essentially paraphrase what I'd just said, often less coherently, but it would be hailed as visionary. My ideas, when they came from my mouth, were too in the weeds, lacking executive perspective. From Mark's, they were actionable insights. The environment was suffocating. Other women in the department kept their heads down, a silent understanding passing between us in fleeting glances in the hallway or the break room. 1 or 2 had tried to push back in the past, only to be labeled difficult or not a team player, and eventually managed out. I saw what happened. I learned to be quiet, to observe, to document. My performance reviews were always a mix of exceeds expectations in technical skills and needs development in leadership presence or executive communication. It was a catch-22 designed to keep me exactly where I was, doing the heavy lifting while others took the credit and the promotions. When I tentatively asked about the team lead position that had opened up 6 months prior to the Phoenix Initiative theft, the one that Mark eventually got, despite having less experience and a demonstrably poorer understanding of the core systems, Mr. Harrison had actually chuckled. "Eleanor," he'd said, leaning back in his chair, "you're an excellent analyst, truly top-notch. But leading a team, it's a different ballgame. You need to be able to command a room, to inspire. Mark has that natural charisma." My meticulously prepared list of accomplishments, my proposals for team development, all went unread on his desk. That was the day the quiet resolve I'd been nurturing began to harden into something sharper, something more focused. They saw me as a cog, a useful but ultimately replaceable part of their machine. They never once considered that the cog might be capable of redesigning the entire engine. Their arrogance, their blindness, it was a constant grating reminder that to them, I was, and would always be, less, unless I found a way to make them see. Just when I felt most adrift, most invisible in that sea of corporate indifference, a lifeline appeared. It wasn't from within my department, certainly not from anyone who reported to Mr. Harrison. It came from an entirely unexpected quarter, Ms. Evelyn Hayes, the Senior Vice President of Special Projects, a woman legendary within the company for her sharp intellect, her no-nonsense attitude, and her almost mythical ability to turn failing ventures into gold mines. She was based in the New York headquarters, a distant, powerful figure I'd only ever seen in company-wide video conferences. Our paths crossed, quite literally, because of a data anomaly. I'd flagged a discrepancy in a cross-departmental dataset that was feeding into one of her major initiatives. It was a small error, easily overlooked, but it had the potential to skew projections significantly. I'd traced it back to a faulty input script from a department completely unrelated to mine or hers. Most people in my position would have just flagged it to their immediate superior. In my case, Mr. Harrison, who likely would have delegated it to Mark, who would have then either ignored it or fumbled it. But I knew its potential impact on Ms. Hayes's project. So, after a week of Harrison predictably not having the bandwidth to even look at my report on the issue, I took a deep breath and emailed Ms. Hayes's executive assistant directly, attaching my detailed analysis. I expected, at best, a polite brush-off, or for it to be routed back down the chain of command, inevitably landing on Harrison's desk with a note that would make me look like I'd overstepped. Instead, less than an hour later, my phone rang. "Eleanor Vance? This is Evelyn Hayes. I'm looking at your report. It's thorough. Walk me through it." Her voice was crisp, direct, no time wasted on pleasantries. For the next 30 minutes, I explained the data flow, the source of the error, and the potential cascading consequences. She didn't interrupt, just listened, occasionally asking a pointed, insightful question that showed she understood the technical nuances far better than Mr. Harrison ever had. At the end of our call, there was a pause. "This is excellent work, Ms. Vance," she said finally. "You've potentially saved us millions and a considerable amount of embarrassment. Why hasn't this been escalated through your department head?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I did bring it to Mr. Harrison's attention, ma'am. He's been very busy." It was the most diplomatic way I could phrase it. Ms. Hayes made a sound that might have been a dry chuckle. "Busy, I see. Well, your initiative here is noted, and your analytical skills. We need more people who actually look at the data instead of just shuffling it. Keep up the good work." And that was it. Or so I thought. A few days later, I received an email from her. It was brief, simply asking if I had any latent project proposals or identified inefficiencies that weren't getting traction within my current departmental structure. It was a carefully worded invitation. An opening. It was the first time in years someone at Innovate Solutions had acknowledged not just my work, but my potential to think strategically. Over the next few months, we developed an unorthodox, under-the-radar correspondence. I'd send her concise memos on process improvements I'd identified or market opportunities backed by data that my department was too slow or too dismissive to consider. She'd occasionally reply with a one-line email, "Interesting," "Develop further," or "Explore the risk factors." It was like having a secret mentor, someone who saw the value I was so desperate to prove. She never explicitly criticized Mr. Harrison or my department, but her very engagement was a form of validation. It was Ms. Hayes who, after I sent her a very early, very rough concept paper on what would eventually become the Phoenix Initiative, a plan to overhaul our outdated client interface system using a new AI-driven personalization engine, replied with 2 words, "Intriguing. Pursue." That quiet encouragement was the spark I needed. She didn't offer resources or explicit backing at that stage, but she gave me something far more valuable, the belief that my ideas weren't just in the weeds, but had genuine high-level potential. She saw the strategist, the leader, that Mr. Harrison and Mark refused to acknowledge, and knowing she was watching, however distantly, gave me the courage to start building my secret weapon. Ms. Hayes's "intriguing, pursue" became my silent mandate, while Mr. Harrison and Mark were busy congratulating themselves on successfully sidelining me from any meaningful advancement. I was building an empire in the shadows. The Phoenix Initiative wasn't just an idea anymore. It was my mission. I knew I couldn't develop it openly. Harrison would either dismiss it outright or, worse, assign Mark to oversee it, which meant he'd take credit for any success and blame me for any failure. So I went underground. My days were a carefully orchestrated performance of the good worker bee. I completed my assigned tasks with my usual quiet efficiency, attended the pointless meetings, nodded politely when Mark presented yet another half-baked idea stolen from a water cooler conversation. But my evenings, my weekends, and every spare moment I could steal were dedicated to Phoenix. I transformed my small apartment into a war room. Whiteboards covered in flowcharts, sticky notes with code snippets, research papers on AI and user experience design piled high. I taught myself 2 new coding languages. I devoured online courses on project management and agile development, the very skills Harrison claimed I lacked. I knew I couldn't build something of this magnitude entirely alone, not without raising suspicion or burning out. So I started to quietly identify others within Innovate Solutions who were, like me, undervalued and overlooked. There was Sarah from IT, a brilliant coder who was constantly talked down to by her male colleagues. There was David from marketing, a creative genius whose innovative campaign ideas were always deemed too risky by his conservative manager. And there was old Mr. Henderson from Archives, a man with an encyclopedic knowledge of the company's past projects, successes, and more importantly, its failures, who was largely ignored and treated like a piece of furniture. I approached them carefully, one by one, not with a grand pronouncement, but with specific problems I needed their expertise to solve for a personal development project. I framed it as a learning exercise, a way to stretch our skills outside our restrictive day jobs. To my surprise and relief, they were intrigued. They, too, were hungry for a challenge, for a chance to do meaningful work that was recognized. We became a secret skunkworks team, communicating through encrypted channels, holding clandestine meetings in coffee shops far from the office, or late at night via video calls when our respective taskmasters were long gone. Sarah built the back-end architecture, David crafted the user interface mock-ups and a viral marketing strategy, and Mr. Henderson provided invaluable historical context and identified potential pitfalls based on past company endeavors. I was the architect, the strategist, the project manager, the leader. I coordinated their efforts, set deadlines, troubleshooted problems, and kept our morale high, all while maintaining my facade of the quiet analyst. The irony was rich. Harrison and Mark would occasionally throw me scraps of work they deemed too tedious or complex for Mark to handle, grunt work they thought would keep me busy and out of their hair. They had no idea these tasks, often involving deep dives into company data or system analytics, were actually feeding directly into the Phoenix Initiative, providing me with the exact information and access I needed. I was using their own dismissiveness against them. There were close calls, of course. Times when I had to scramble to hide my work, when Harrison made an unexpected visit to my cubicle, or when Mark, trying to assert his imagined authority, would demand to know what I was really working on with such focus. I learned to be vague, to deflect, to have decoy projects open on my screen. The stress was immense, the hours grueling. Many nights I barely slept, fueled by a potent cocktail of coffee, determination, and a burning desire to prove them all wrong. About 3 months into this clandestine operation, Ms. Hayes emailed me again. "Status report on intriguing?" she asked. I sent her a concise, high-level overview of our progress, the team I'd assembled, without naming names, just skill sets, and our projected timeline for a functional prototype. Her reply was, again, brief, impressive, maintain discretion, let me know when you have a demonstrable beta. That was all the encouragement I needed. She wasn't just a passive observer, she was quietly sanctioning my rebellion. She knew what I was doing, or at least the gist of it, and she was letting it happen. This silent endorsement from someone so high up was the shield I needed. It gave my secret team a sense of legitimacy, a belief that our efforts weren't entirely in vain or entirely rogue. We were building something revolutionary, and the most powerful woman in the company was, in her own way, cheering us on from the sidelines. The Phoenix was slowly, surely, rising from the ashes of my officially dismissed ambitions. The day of the executive presentation arrived. The one Mr. Harrison and Mark had been crowing about for weeks. The one where they would unveil their groundbreaking Phoenix Initiative. I'd seen the heavily plagiarized, watered-down version of my proposal they'd circulated internally. It was clumsy, missing key technical details, and a pale imitation of what my team and I had actually built. I walked into the main conference room, the one reserved for big announcements, and took a seat at the back, just another face in the crowd. Mr. Harrison was preening at the front, adjusting his tie, while Mark paced, practically vibrating with nervous excitement and self-importance. The CEO, Mr. Davenport, and the other VPs were settling in. Mark started the presentation. His voice was overly loud, his gestures exaggerated. He clicked through the slides, my slides, albeit with their corporate branding slapped on. He stumbled over the technical explanations, relying on buzzwords rather than substance. Mr. Harrison interjected with his usual sycophantic praise for Mark's vision. I watched, my heart pounding a steady rhythm of anticipation and controlled fury. I let them go on for about 15 minutes, long enough for them to thoroughly entangle themselves in their lies, long enough for the executives to start looking slightly confused by the lack of depth despite the grand claims. Then, just as Mark was about to move to a slide detailing the projected rollout timeline, a timeline that was laughably optimistic given their lack of a functional prototype, I cleared my throat. It wasn't loud, but in the slightly strained atmosphere, it cut through the room. "Excuse me, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. All heads turned. Mark looked annoyed. Mr. Harrison frowned. "Eleanor, is there something you need? We're in the middle of a rather important presentation." "I understand, Mr. Harrison," I replied, standing up, "and I apologize for the interruption, but I believe there might be some confusion regarding the Phoenix Initiative." Mark scoffed. "Confusion? Ellie, with all due respect, perhaps the technical aspects are a bit over your head. This is high-level strategy." "Oh, I think I grasp the strategy, Mark," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "In fact, I grasp it so well, perhaps I could offer a live demonstration of the actual Phoenix Initiative, the one that's fully functional, extensively tested, and ready for beta deployment." A murmur went through the room. Mr. Davenport, the CEO, leaned forward, his expression intrigued. "A live demonstration, Ms. Vance?" "Yes, sir," I said, pulling a small, discreet remote from my pocket. "If you'll direct your attention to the main screen." Before Mark or Harrison could react, I clicked the remote. The image on the large screen behind them, which had been displaying their PowerPoint, flickered and changed. It was replaced by the sleek, dynamic login screen of the real Phoenix Initiative, my team's logo subtly watermarked in the corner. "This," I announced, my voice now resonating with the authority Harrison said I lacked, "is the Phoenix Initiative, developed over the past 6 months by a dedicated cross-departmental team that I have had the privilege to lead." The color drained from Mark's face. He looked like he'd been slapped. Mr. Harrison started to sputter. "Now, see here, Eleanor, this is highly irregular. What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning, Mr. Harrison," I said, my gaze unwavering, "is that you and Mark are presenting a stolen, incomplete concept. What I'm about to show you is the result of months of dedicated work, innovation, and actual leadership." I then proceeded to give a flawless, concise, and compelling demonstration of the Phoenix platform. I highlighted its advanced AI capabilities, its intuitive user interface, designed by David, its robust back-end, built by Sarah, and its seamless integration with existing company systems, referencing historical data points provided by Mr. Henderson. I answered technical questions from the VPs with ease and precision, demonstrating a depth of knowledge Mark could only dream of. With each feature I unveiled, the expressions on Mark's and Harrison's faces shifted from shock to horror to a dawning, sickening realization of their public exposure. Mark was stammering, trying to interject, but his words were lost, his credibility evaporating with every click of my remote. Mr. Harrison looked like he was about to have an apoplexy, his face a mottled red. The other executives were riveted, no longer confused, but now deeply impressed. Then came the masterstroke. I cued a pre-recorded video testimonial from one of our key beta testers, a major client Ms. Hayes had discreetly connected me with, praising the platform's efficiency and innovation. As the glowing review ended, I turned back to the room. "The Phoenix Initiative is not just a concept, gentlemen," I said, my eyes locking onto Mr. Davenport. "It's a reality, and it's ready to revolutionize how we engage with our clients." Just then, as if on cue, the conference room doors opened, and Ms. Evelyn Hayes herself walked in. She surveyed the scene, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Apologies for my tardiness, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice carrying easily. "I trust Eleanor has brought you up to speed on the true status of the Phoenix Initiative, the one I've been personally tracking and informally mentoring for the better part of a year, given its exceptional promise and the, shall we say, lack of internal support it initially received through conventional channels." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by Mark's choked gasp and Mr. Harrison's jaw practically hitting the polished mahogany table. The looks on their faces, the sheer, unadulterated humiliation, it was everything I had worked for. It was better. If this story of turning the tables resonates with you, or if you've ever dreamed of a moment like this, hit that like button to support more stories of empowerment. It really helps the channel reach more people who need to hear they're not alone. The aftermath of that presentation was swift and decisive. Mr. Davenport, the CEO, a man who valued results above all else, was not pleased by the attempted deception. Ms. Hayes' perfectly timed entrance and endorsement had sealed Harrison's and Mark's fates. There was a brief, excruciatingly awkward silence before Mr. Davenport looked directly at me. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice firm, "that was an impressive presentation. And an even more impressive initiative. It seems we have some internal restructuring to discuss." He then turned his steely gaze upon Mr. Harrison and Mark. "Gentlemen, my office, now." They practically scurried out, their faces pale and their arrogance completely deflated. The remaining VPs crowded around me, full of questions and congratulations. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. For the first time, I wasn't just Eleanor, the quiet analyst. I was Eleanor Vance, the leader of the Phoenix Initiative. Later that day, I was summoned to Mr. Davenport's office. Ms. Hayes was already there, a subtle smile on her face. Mr. Davenport was direct. "Eleanor," he began, foregoing the formal "Ms. Vance," "the Phoenix Initiative is greenlit for immediate company-wide rollout. You will head the new Special Projects Division, reporting directly to Ms. Hayes. You will have full autonomy to select your team and the resources you need." He paused, then added, "And a significant raise in title commensurate with your new responsibilities, of course." It was more than I had dared to hope for. "Thank you, Mr. Davenport, Ms. Hayes," I managed, my voice thick with emotion. "I won't let you down." "We know you won't," Ms. Hayes said warmly. As for Mr. Harrison and Mark Jenkins, their downfall was as public as their attempted theft. Mr. Harrison was quietly encouraged into early retirement a week later. The official story was that he wanted to spend more time with his family, but everyone knew the truth. His reign of smug mediocrity was over. Mark Jenkins was demoted, stripped of his unearned team lead title and reassigned to a dead-end data entry position in a forgotten corner of the building, under a manager who, I heard, did not appreciate his natural charisma nearly as much as Harrison had. The Golden Boy's shine had been permanently tarnished. The first thing I did in my new role was to officially bring Sarah, David, and Mr. Henderson onto my team, with promotions and salaries that reflected their incredible contributions. Seeing the looks on their faces when I offered them their new positions, the dawning realization that their talent was finally being recognized, was almost as satisfying as watching Harrison and Mark squirm. We were no longer a secret skunkworks. We were a recognized force of innovation within the company. Mark tried to approach me a few days after the presentation, a pathetic attempt at an apology oozing from him. Eleanor, he stammered. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I guess I got carried away. Harrison, you know, he can be very persuasive." I looked at him, not with anger anymore, but with a cool detachment. "Mark," I said, my voice even, "what you and Mr. Harrison tried to do was not just getting carried away. It was unethical, and it was an attempt to steal credit for the hard work of myself and my team. Your apology, frankly, means very little to me now. I suggest you focus on your new responsibilities." He visibly deflated and slunk away. I had no interest in his excuses. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. I wasn't the worker bee anymore. I was the one setting the terms. Mr. Harrison didn't even attempt an apology. He just avoided eye contact with me in the hallways during his last week, a broken man whose carefully constructed facade had crumbled. The fear in his eyes when he realized I now outranked him and reported to someone he could never manipulate was a quiet kind of justice. He knew he couldn't diminish me anymore. The atmosphere in my old department changed almost overnight. With Harrison gone and the clear message sent from the top about the value of genuine contribution over bluster, a sense of cautious optimism began to emerge. People started speaking up more in meetings, sharing ideas without fear of immediate dismissal or theft. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I made sure to mentor other women in the company, to share my story where appropriate, to encourage them to find their own allies, and to never let anyone else define their worth or their capabilities. The Phoenix Initiative became a symbol not just of a successful project, but of a cultural shift, however small, within Innovate Solutions. Looking back on that whole insane period, it's still a bit surreal. From being the overlooked analyst, the worker bee they thought they could crush, to leading a flagship division and reporting to one of the most powerful women in the company. It's a journey I wouldn't trade, despite the pain and frustration that fueled it. What Mr. Harrison and Mark never understood, what so many like them fail to grasp, is that true leadership isn't about presence or charisma or who can talk the loudest in a meeting. It's about vision, dedication, resilience, and the ability to inspire and empower a team to achieve something extraordinary. It's about recognizing talent in others, even when it's hidden or suppressed, and giving it the space to flourish. They told me I'd never manage a team. Well, I managed a secret team that outmaneuvered and outperformed their entire established, resource-rich department. They tried to steal my project, but they only succeeded in exposing their own incompetence and duplicity. The satisfaction of that moment in the conference room wasn't just about revenge, though I'll admit that part was incredibly sweet. It was about validation. It was about proving, not just to them, but to myself, that I was more than they ever allowed me to be. It was about reclaiming my narrative. My journey taught me that your value isn't determined by those who seek to diminish you. It's defined by your actions, your integrity, and your refusal to let their limitations become your own. It taught me the importance of finding allies, even in the most unexpected places, like Ms. Hayes, who saw potential where others saw only what they wanted to see. And it taught me that sometimes the quietest people in the room are the ones with the most revolutionary ideas, working silently, diligently, until the moment comes to make their voices heard. The Phoenix Initiative thrives today, a testament to what a dedicated, diverse team can achieve when given the opportunity. Sarah is now a lead architect, David heads up our digital engagement, and Mr. Henderson, well, he's our revered institutional memory and strategic advisor, finally getting the respect he always deserved. We're still innovating, still pushing boundaries, and still proving that real talent, real hard work, will always, eventually, triumph over posturing and deceit. This experience changed me. I'm no longer the woman who hesitates to speak up, who allows her ideas to be casually dismissed. I found my voice, my power, and my command. And I learned that sometimes the greatest acts of empowerment come from refusing to be what others expect you to be, and instead, forging your own path, even if you have to do it in secret for a while. What would you have done in my place? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so you don't miss the next story of triumph over adversity. My story is just one of many, and I believe that by sharing these experiences, we empower each other. We show the world that underestimation is often the fuel for the most spectacular comebacks. Never let anyone tell you what you are or aren't capable of. Your potential is yours alone to define and unleash.